In 1910, the Fox family moved from Gibson City to Peoria. It was a 60-mile trip. Sax's niece, Elizabeth Giesenberg, and her husband lived in the Fox's home after they moved. They helped take care of the property. Sax had a car, the Model T. He drove back and forth to Gibson City to work his farm. But he also drove with his family to Radnor to see their Aunt Kate and their cousins. They were only a few miles away. Mary had kept her promise. Sax and Mary selected their new home carefully. The Foxes lived at 102 North Borland Avenue. It was within walking distance of the Bradley Institute and Peoria High School. But there was another reason. Borland Avenue is 1 block away from University Street. From University Street, it was only 6 miles to Kate's house. Mary's twin sister Ella lived 7 miles away on Trigger Road. Ella's 2 daughters, Charlotte and Helen, both attended Bradley Polytech University. Walter's daughter, Ann Rooston, went there too. Charlotte lived at home on RFD Route 2. Helen lived in Peoria on Elmwood Avenue. Ann Rooston lived on Barker Avenue. They were both within walking distance of Sax and Mary's house. Mary checked on her nieces regularly. She kept in close contact with Kate and Ella. In 1910, Mary visited Kate every day. Kate's daughter Florabelle was pregnant. Florabelle soon had her child. It was a daughter they named Violet. She was Florabelle's last child, Kate's 5th grandchild. They were all Grandpa Chambers' favorites. The Foxes lived in this neighborhood in a brand new home built in 1910. The area hasn't changed much. Most of the original homes are still there. Sax and Mary are getting older and their children are growing. Our great Aunt Nellie was a school teacher. Walter had graduated from Illinois State and was a book salesman. He was also a librarian and a literature teacher. Ray transferred from the university and was attending Bradley Polytech. There he studied industrial arts. Ray was doing very well at Bradley. He was a student assistant in the physics department. Ray and Walter were both active in the YMCA. Ray was the president in 1913. Chester was 17 and a senior at Peoria High School. There he met 15-year-old Marjorie Barkley. She was a sophomore. Marjorie lived around the corner from the Foxes on Fredonia Avenue. Chester and Marjorie walked to school every day and were soon going steady. Marjorie lived with her mother and her 30-year-old sister Clara. Her father was killed in a tragic railroad accident when she was only 3. Marjorie's mother was a piano teacher, and Marjorie could play the piano very well. She was soon very good friends with Chester's little sister Grace. Grace was attending a new type of school, a junior high school. In 1910, Grace was 12 and should have been in the 7th grade. But she was moved ahead one year when she started school in Gibson City. So in 1910, Grace was in the 8th grade. A few weeks after classes started, Grace's teachers wanted to talk to Sax and Mary. There was a problem at school. According to all of her teachers, Grace was several years ahead of her classmates. She should be in high school, but she was too young. But she could go next year. Her teacher wanted to work with her so she would be better prepared. She would make the arrangements to have Grace enrolled at Peoria High School in 1911, pending her parents' permission. Sax and Mary asked Grace what she wanted to do. She liked the idea. Grace would skip the 9th grade. The following year, in 1911, Grace was a sophomore at Peoria High School. At the age of 13, she was 2 years younger than the youngest students. Although new at school, Grace already had several friends. One of her closest friends was 16-year-old Marjorie Barkley, a junior. Marjorie was her brother's girlfriend. In 1911, Grace's older brother Chester was 18 and in college. Marjorie would come to Grace's house after school. It was a convenient excuse to see Chester. Marjorie would bring her good friend, Ethel Drury. Ethel lived in the neighborhood on Orange Street. She was the same age as Marjorie. When Marjorie first told Ethel about Grace's puppet shows, she thought it sounded juvenile. But when she saw the puppet theater Grace's brother Ray had built, she was impressed. It was very entertaining. Marjorie did all the music. Her new friends gave Grace new marionettes for her birthday. Marjorie gave her a blue fairy, and Ethel gave her a cat. Grace named him Figaro. Grace worked him in with her Pinocchio story. She did not like the book. It was too dark. The girls had a lot of fun together. They listened to records and liked to play hide and seek with Grace's brothers. Grace and Marjorie noticed that Ethel would often disappear with Grace's 23-year-old brother Walter. The girls asked her about it. Ethel confided to her friends that she was in love with Walter. The girls would keep that a secret. The Fox children saw their cousins often. Mary kept in close contact with her twin sister Ella and her sister-in-law Kate. The girls were getting older, but they were raising their families together like they promised. Kate's youngest daughter, 18-year-old Pearl, was a senior at Dunlap High School. Kate wanted her to go to Bradley Polytech with her cousins. Pearl was Kate's last child at home. They lived together in a house on one of John Chambers' properties. John lived about 3 miles away with his granddaughter Florabelle and his 2 great-grandchildren. In 1911, John was 79 years old and in poor health. He died the following year. He is buried in Dickinson Cemetery, close to his son and next to his wife, departed for 45 years. When John Chambers died, he was a wealthy man. In addition to his 160-acre farm, he owned several rental properties in the Radnor area. John had 2 surviving sons. Both were financially independent. One of them owned a grocery store in Peoria. John was more concerned about Kate's well-being and the future of his great-grandchildren. He wanted them taken care of, and he knew just the person to do it. In his will, he left everything to Florabelle, including his house. It was the home Florabelle's father was born in. Now it was hers. She had her mother Kate and her sister Pearl move in. Florabelle and her husband Jim remodeled the house. Kate had her own front door, and she could entertain family and friends. Pearl soon met Florabelle's neighbor, George Harlan. Kate and the rest of the Fox family had known the Harlan family since they were children. They lived on Fox Road. Kate's father, William, went past Grandfather Harlan's house every day on his way to the blacksmith shop. Grandmother Harlan helped Ann Fox deliver all 4 of her children, including Saxon Kate. In 1913, Pearl Chambers married George Harlan. It was the 9th wedding hosted by Kate and Mary. Pearl and George moved to Iowa. There, they had 6 children. Florabelle and Kate continued living their lives together. They loved their new home and would both live there until the end of their lives. Kate saw her grandchildren every day. Her brother Walter and his family lived just a few houses down the road. It was the house that she was born and raised in. Her nephew Norvin lived around the corner in Sax's old house. He was still single. Norvin visited Aunt Kate often, especially at dinner time. Kate enjoyed cooking for him, and he enjoyed eating. Norvin loved the farm life, and like Kate and Florabelle, he planned to stay in Radnor permanently. He needed a wife, and Kate and Florabelle would soon find him one. Florabelle had a car. She and Kate would drive around the neighborhood, talking to friends and neighbors. Soon, they met the Case family. They lived across the railroad tracks. Although only 2 miles away, it was a separate township called Medina. The Case family had 9 children, including a daughter, Mamie. In 1913, she was 20. She was 3 years younger than Norvin and had never met him. Mamie did not go to Dunlap High School like Norvin did. Florabelle thought Mamie was perfect for her cousin Norvin. But Florabelle was a rookie, and she needed professional assistance. She introduced Mamie to her mother, Kate. Kate got to know Mamie. Mamie was born and raised on a farm. The Radnor area was her home. She wanted to get married and raise her family there. Her children would grow up with their grandparents, and their aunts, uncles, and cousins. Katie liked Mamie. The girls invited her to dinner at Floribel's house. Norvin will be there, and they can be properly introduced. It worked. The couple began courting, and soon they were engaged. The torch had been passed to a new generation. Kate and Floribel saw the Fox family often, especially the two youngest. Sax and Mary would take Chester and Grace on almost every visit. They liked leaving the city and going to the country to see their Aunt Kate. During the summer, they would stay for several weeks. Grace stayed at Floribel and Kate's house. She liked taking care of her little second cousins. Chester would stay with his older cousin, Norvin. Norvin was still single, and it was just the two guys. Chester worked hard, and Norvin respected him as an adult. He was paid a good salary with real money. Chester was staying in the house his father built. He was working the same land his father worked. It had supported him and his family for years. Chester wanted to raise his sons on a farm the way he was raised. He did not want to live in the city, and he did not want to go to college. Chester wanted to be a farmer. Sax was working the 160-acre farm in Gibson City. With his new car, it took about 3 hours to get there. He usually took some or all of his sons. Sax would often let one of the boys drive. They liked working the farm with their dad. They grew up there. They worked together as a team and knew exactly what to do. With 4 people, the workday was very short. Sax realized that most of their time was spent traveling. He had 3 grown boys, and they could easily manage a farm twice the size of his. His son George had a big farm in Minnesota. George wanted his family to move up there with him. By 1914, Sax's 2 oldest sons had both finished college. Ray graduated from Bradley Polytech. He had a degree in industrial arts and was a master carpenter. Walter was a teacher and a librarian. Neither one had a serious girlfriend that they knew of. Chester had a steady girlfriend, Marjorie Barkley. They had become serious about each other. He had finished 2 years of college, but book learning was not for him. He wanted to be a farmer, and Sax would help him get started. Sax discussed everything with the family. They decided to live on a farm again. Sax invested in a new venture. It was a family farm, and it was a big one. The property was in his sons' names. But Sax and Mary could only stay for a season or 2 to help them get started. They had another family priority to address. Daughter Grace was having problems at school again. She was no longer attending Peoria High School. At the age of 16, she was in college at Bradley Polytech. Sax and Mary knew she would finish early and would want to continue her education. For how long, no one knew. The only school in the Midwest suitable for Grace would be the University of Minnesota. It was in Minneapolis. The Fox family would be moving to Minnesota. Mary broke the news to Kate. Both girls knew this day would eventually arrive, and here it was. But the girls had kept their childhood promise and raised their families together. All of Kate's children were adults. They were secure and happily married with families of their own. But Mary still had 2 children to raise. Chester was to become a farmer. Sax would soon have him established. Kate knew that Grace would eventually attend a major university. The whole family knew. Walter said it best back in '09 when Grace was moved ahead for the 2nd time. "Little brother," Walter said, "they're going to run out of older kids one day, and you will be in a pickle." Grace graduated when she was 17. She wanted to go to the University of Minnesota, but would have to wait. Sax needed a year or 2 to get the farm started for Chester and the boys. After that, they would move to Minneapolis. Mary promised Grace that she would finish her education. Aunt Kate assured Grace that her mother does not make empty promises. The Fox family said goodbye to their many friends, including Ethel Drury and Marjorie Barkley. Chester and Marjorie would write to each other. In 1915, the entire Fox family moved to Blue Earth, Minnesota. Located in Faribault County, Blue Earth is a very small township. In the year 2000, The population was 454. There are 13.8 people per square mile.